Hello, sightgoers. Welcome back. Have you ever heard of the Bermuda Triangle? It's one of the most well-known mysteries in the world. Ships and planes have been vanishing within this region for centuries, but what really happens there? Before we get started, remember to hit the subscribe button for more videos. Also, stick around until the end to learn about our special offer just for you. Why is the Bermuda Triangle so popular? People have always been fascinated by unsolved mysteries. And over the years, more and more wild theories have surfaced regarding the Bermuda Triangle. Even though it's a pretty small area, the number of ships and planes that have disappeared there is staggering. But these incidents didn't all happen at once. They were spread out over a period of 100 years, which adds another layer of confusion. In reality, it's normal for ships to sink and planes to crash. There are thousands of maritime accidents every year. So why should we pay special attention to the ones that happened in the Bermuda Triangle? Well, in most cases, the wrecks of these ships can be explained by human error, bad weather, piracy, or mechanical failure. In the case of the Bermuda Triangle, none of those explanations make sense. We're talking about ships that were fully equipped with the latest technology, planes that had top-notch pilots and crew members, and routes that had been traveled countless times before without any problems. Even though many people are still convinced that something paranormal is going on in the Bermuda Triangle, we're going to present you with the most logical explanation for each of the most famous disappearances. Flight 19. On December 5, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They were supposed to do some training exercises near the Bahamas. Their route was actually quite far from the actual Bermuda Triangle, but they would enter the area later on. As they flew over the ocean, the pilots reported that their compasses were broken. They asked for permission to return to base, but soon after, communications were lost. Despite having full tanks of fuel, the aircraft did not attempt to land on the water or contact other air traffic control stations. A search party was sent out immediately, but they only found traces of the plane the next day. It wasn't even on the radar. All 5 crew members had vanished into thin air. Scientists have several theories as to what may have happened here. One of them is the so-called magnetic compass error. When flying over the Atlantic Ocean, especially near the equator, the Earth's magnetic field can affect the compasses. This can lead to very big errors, which means that the pilots could have been completely lost and ended up flying into the ocean. Star Tiger was an American cargo plane that first flew in 1943. It had a total of 4 engines and was designed to carry heavy loads. On January 25, 1948, the plane left Belgium for New York City, but on its way there, it was scheduled to make a stop in the Azores. But the plane never arrived. The last message from the pilot was that they were preparing to land, but minutes later, the radio operator picked up a transmission from the pilot of another plane, who said he had seen a large orange object floating in the sky. Some people believe that this orange object was actually the Star Tiger. At first, the authorities thought that it had crashed in the ocean, but no wreckage was ever found. The plane simply vanished. There are 2 main theories for what happened. One of them is the hole in the sky. According to this theory, the plane suddenly entered a vortex that sucked it up into the sky. Unfortunately, there isn't much evidence to support this idea. The other explanation makes much more sense. The captain of the Star Tiger probably made a fatal navigation error. He landed the plane in the wrong place and it ran out of fuel. Since the plane was so large, it didn't sink immediately. Instead, it floated on the surface of the ocean, where it was eventually torn apart by strong winds. Eastern Star. On March 13, 1909, the captain of the ship Eastern Star sent out a distress signal. His ship had encountered very rough seas and he feared that it wouldn't survive the night. The captain repeated his message every hour to let the nearby ships know how serious his situation was. But in the morning, when the other ships approached the location, they couldn't find the Eastern Star anywhere. The sea was calm and there were no signs of a wreck. The only thing they found was an empty lifeboat. In 2017, researchers discovered the likely cause of this disappearance. It was a massive wave that was around 3 times higher than the ship itself. Although such waves are relatively rare, they're not impossible. That's why sometimes you see giant waves crashing on beaches in the middle of the night. In the case of the Eastern Star, the giant wave knocked the mast of the ship down, causing it to capsize. The passengers then fled to the lifeboat. But once the wave passed, the lifeboat was also pushed into the ocean. The disappearance of the Cyclops was one of the biggest maritime mysteries in the 20th century. On March 3, 1918, the ship departed from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, but it never arrived in Salvador, Brazil, which was its next stop. On March 15, the captain spotted a derelict lifeboat floating in the ocean. He pulled the survivors out of the water, and they told him that the Cyclops had sunk after colliding with a rock. However, the lifeboat didn't match the description of any of the boats that were on board the Cyclops. which means that the survivors weren't from that ship. In fact, it is believed that the survivors of the Cyclops stole the lifeboat from another vessel that was sailing nearby. On April 1918, the Cyclops was declared lost at sea with 168 people on board. The ship had been carrying manganese ore, which is a type of metal that's highly sought after because of its various uses. The price of manganese ore increased dramatically during the First World War. So naturally, the government wanted to find the Cyclops and retrieve the valuable cargo. They even offered a reward of $10,000 to anyone who could find the wreck. But despite extensive searches, nothing was found. It took 50 years for scientists to come up with a reasonable explanation for what happened. The Cyclops didn't hit a rock or sink due to bad weather. It suffered from something called galvanic corrosion. Basically, when two dissimilar metals come into contact with seawater, a current is created. The metal that's more prone to corrosion acts as an anode and corrodes very quickly. In the case of the Cyclops, the anode was the anchor and the cathode was the hull. After a few months, the ship's hull was filled with holes and it sank. USS Nimrod. The USS Nimrod was a U.S. Navy submarine that was launched in 1919. On February 1st, it was patrolling near the Bahamas when it went missing. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened, but it's believed that the submarine collided with another ship and sank. To make things worse, the crew knew that their submarine was in poor condition. The USS Nimrod had already sprung a leak and the captain had reported that the vessel would likely sink at any moment. When the submarine was finally located, it was empty. It seems like the crew managed to escape before it sank, but they also didn't surface. There's a simple explanation for this disappearance. When the submarine sank, the crew likely opened the escape hatch and fled to the surface, but they forgot to release the pressure inside the submarine. This sudden release of pressure would have caused their lungs to explode, killing them instantly. Coanzeb was a cargo ship that sank in 1968. At first, the ship seemed to be doing fine, but it started to suffer from engine trouble. Soon after, the crew sent out a distress call, but nobody answered. The next morning, the Coast Guard arrived at the scene, but they couldn't find any sign of the ship. They only found an abandoned lifeboat and part of a lifebuoy. The most reasonable explanation is that the captain tried to reach the nearest island, but the ship began to crack during the journey. The crew then fled to the lifeboats, but they were unable to save them. Do you think there is something paranormal going on in the Bermuda Triangle? Or can everything be explained scientifically? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave us a like. Subscribe for more content. This is our channel. Thanks for watching.